Alright, how's it going, folks? Just doing a wee update for March, let you know how things are going. So, yeah, I've been reading far fewer books than I did last year, and that's okay, I'm fine with that. So, let's talk about books I've finished and haven't spoken about yet. Right, first off, I've got Margaret Thatcher's authorised biography by Charles Moore. The size of that. Took me ages to get through it. 4-5 months maybe. And it was good. In fact, it's very good. It's very detailed and gave me everything I wanted and more. So we'll just get that out of the way. I think in a sense it was too detailed. I know that there's now an abridged version that encompasses all 3 volumes and puts them all into one. I think that's probably a better bet for me because there was a lot in there that I struggled with, to be honest, particularly when it talked about economics. That's never been my forte, and monetarism and all of that stuff. I struggled with it. But yeah, the reason I wanted to read it is because that was my era. I grew up during the Thatcher era. So I was born 71 and she came to become leader of the Conservative Party in 75 and then became Prime Minister in 79. So I don't remember it. I don't remember the election, but I do remember she's the first Prime Minister that I remember. So yeah, I wanted to learn about that period of history and about my own country, and in actual fact, it's partly not about my own country because I'm Scottish. So, you know, she was not popular in Scotland at all. Not at all. Partly because of the poll tax, when she introduced the poll tax in Scotland a year before she did in England. So, yeah, Scotland didn't like that. I read a lot about the miners' strikes as well, which, you know, I remember that from the news. But I didn't know about the earlier ones, so that was interesting. But my knowledge of the labour movement and of the trade unions, or the trades union, I believe is the correct plural, yeah, I don't really fully understand all of that either. So, you know, I'm learning as I go. Then there was the whole Maze prison thing with the hunger strikes in Ireland, the Irish question. You know, I remember that being on the news. The hunger strikes were a big part of British news at the time. So, yeah, I recall. But again, I was probably too young to take it in what was happening. So it was fascinating to learn about that. I would like perhaps to read a more less in-depth summary of that period of history. But, you know, maybe one day I will. I don't know. I'm not going to jump into volume 2 right away. That might come maybe in a year's time or something, I don't know. But I think actually what I'd prefer to do is get the abridged version and then maybe read it from the start and go through the same period I've already covered. This book here takes you up to the Falklands, which 1982, when Argentina invaded the Falkland Islands, and it was really the making of Thatcher. And it's described excellently in the book, and I did find myself getting a little bit emotional reading about it, just because, you know, I was a military man. Not in 1982 I wasn't, but later on I joined in 88. So yeah, I think that's always been a part of who I am, or maybe just since I joined the army, when I became, you know, a proud patriot, I guess you might say. So that's the Thatcher biography. I'm glad it's over. Took a while. It's excellent book. If you're interested in Thatcher, then that's the one to go to. It's the authorised biography, and the author, Charles Moore, had access to Thatcher as well as loads and loads of documents and stuff. He was instructed by Thatcher not to publish before she died, so that's what he did. He waited until she died before these volumes were published. So that's the Thatcher bio. Next up is Black Earth by Andrew Mayer. This was a recommendation by Brock Covington on his YouTube channel. This, my friends, I had the best time with this. Andrew Mayer is an academic, a traveller, a Russian speaker. He was in Russia, well, he's been in Russia many times. He's lived there and he knows the country outside in. And in this book, published in 2004, so that gives you an idea of how recent it is. It's a travel log, so the author takes us to different regions. I mean, as you'll know, Russia is the biggest country in the world. It crosses 11 time zones, and to think of it as a single country is a bit mental. If you think of the UK as 4 countries, then, you know, and it's the size of not even a small region in Russia. So, yeah, the variety of geography and culture and history and landscape and people just, yeah. So it starts in Moscow, and he meets up, the moment that stood out to me was when he met up with some Western investors, and they went to an expensive restaurant, and they discussed the crazy times of the 90s and how easy it was to make money at the time because it was wild, but also how dangerous a time it was for making money because it was wild. And one of the people that he met for this dinner was Bill Browder, who's an investor and ran the Hermitage Investment Fund or Heritage? Can't remember exactly, one of those two. And he made a lot of money in Russia and then became subject to mafia interference, about which I'm going to be reading quite soon. I might as well mention this now. This is a book that I picked up used from one of my favourite used bookshops. It's in Wemyss railway station. And I saw the star in the title, so I was like, yeah, I'm going to have that. And it was £1.50, so of course I'm going to buy it. But I had no idea who Bill Browder was. And then I saw him being interviewed quite recently, actually, on David Perell's podcast, something about writing. I can't remember the exact title. I'll put it in the show notes below. And in that discussion, he talked about his time in Russia and the wildness of it all. And I thought, I've got his book, so I pulled it off the shelf. And at that time, I'd already read the Moscow chapter in Black Earth and hadn't noticed the name Bill Browder. It hadn't pinged on my radar. And then all of a sudden, I was like, wait a minute, isn't that one of the guys? So there you go. I love it when little things like that happen. So Andrew Mayer starts in Moscow, and let's just look up the chapter markers to tell you where he goes next, because I can't remember off the top of my head. Next, south to the zone. So he goes to Grozny in 2000 when the Second War is kicking off, has already started. And he talks of the difficulties and when he's encountering Russian militia at border checks. And then he goes in to discuss there was a massacre in a town near Grozny called Aldi, where the citizens of the town were basically massacred by the OMON forces, which is the Russian special police, like the SWAT teams kind of thing. He talks with some of the people that were involved with that and gets first-hand accounts of what happened in Aldi, and it's absolutely horrifying. And the repercussions of that, well, I would hope are still going on, you know, just awful. And hearing about doctors having to deal with dead bodies and having to identify them, and dealing with distraught mothers who'd come to find their dead sons, and just, what a time. And the way he describes it, you know, travelling around the region in the back of a UAZ, which is a UAZ Russian made. Is it Russian made? I can't remember where these are made. A kind of Jeep 4x4 kind of thing. So, yeah, that was eye-opening and enlightening. From there he goes north to the 69th parallel, where he goes to the city of Norilsk, which is where there's a big, massive nickel mine, and it was built by prison labour. This was where Stalin would send political prisoners and criminals as labour, where they built this massive mine and then worked in the mines. And what a place, you know, the way he describes it. Having gone from Grozny, where it's super hot, up to Norilsk, where it's the exact opposite. And, you know, what I loved about this was that you can get on the internet now and you can look these places up. He travelled up to Norilsk, up the Yenisei River. He describes that in depth, and the people he meets on the riverboat and the places they stop. And then when he gets to Norilsk, he stops at the port town outside of Norilsk on the river, where they get transported to the city of Norilsk. And so I was on YouTube looking up these cities and going on to Google Maps, and it's just such a rich thing to have the internet now, that we can look these places up as we're reading. It's the only criticism I have of the book, really, is that there are a few photos, but not enough. You know, I like when books have got these sort of middle sections, like the Thatcher book has got, where you get a photo section. I think there's more than one in this, actually, you know, that kind of thing. I think that's something that's missing from Black Earth, but I was able to look up, as I say, all these places online, which was fantastic and enhanced the reading of the book immeasurably. From there he goes east to the breaking point is the title of this chapter, and he ends up on the island of Sakhalin, which is a big oil mining island off the east coast of the Russian landmass north of Japan. So, you know, we're a long, long way away from Moscow. And he discusses a lot of the corruption and some of the Westerners who came in to drill for oil. It's also a place that was affected by the 1905 war with Japan. Is it the Sea of Okhotsk out there where there's drilling? He actually goes out to one of the rigs. So yeah, it's fascinating to read about that part of the country. And then we go west, the Skazka. So we're back into St. Petersburg now, where we learn a bit more about Putin. This is Putin's city of origin. And we learn about the mafia groups. So he meets with Vladimir Kumarin, who was the head of the Tambov crime group. Apparently he's now a legit businessman. So it's an interesting couple of scenes where he meets with Kumarin in this exclusive restaurant and interviews him. We get Kumarin's take on some of the corruption that was going down in St. Petersburg in the 90s, which allegedly Putin was involved with. And I learned about this in Catherine Belton's book, Putin's People. So yeah, it was amazing that he would get an interview with this guy, and that, you know, they would talk so deeply about what went down in the 90s. Obviously, you know, we're not getting the full picture, but it's a very interesting discussion that they have, which I enjoyed. They also discussed the murder of Starovoitova, who was a politician, and political assassination. One of a few. So yeah, that was the St. Petersburg section. And then we get back to Moscow, where we're kind of, the title of it is Everything is Normal. So we're discussing the coup, the 1991 coup, when Gorbachev was held prisoner at his dacha on the Crimea. Or was it Sochi? I think it was near Sochi, where he was held. He was held prisoner while the hardliners tried to take over the parliament, and it failed. It was the August coup. So yeah, the way it's written, the style of it is very accessible, and you know, it's a page turner. It's the kind of book that you really look forward to picking up, and you don't look forward to having to put down, because it's just so gripping. And yeah, my recommendation is that you read it with the internet by your side, so you can look these places up and look up the people as well for extra photos and stuff. So it's a 5-star read. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Okay, the next book that I have to mention is one I can't show you because I listened to the audiobook, and that's The Little Drummer Girl by John le Carré. Absolutely spectacular book. I started watching it on the BBC. Florence Pugh stars as the main character, and it starts in a German town where there's a bomb goes off. You see the bombs being delivered to someone's house in a leafy suburb, and the bomb goes off, and it's to do with Israel versus Palestine, terrorism in Germany. And the main character is basically, she's an actress, and she gets recruited by the Israeli secret services. She gets recruited and takes part in a sting operation to try and find the main terrorist who's building these bombs. So we watched, I think, 2 episodes, and then I was like, I need to read this book. So it's the second, I believe, John le Carré book I've read. The first one's being The Mission Song, which I read over 20 years ago. And I loved it. It's got me so excited to read more John le Carré. It's just so deep, so well written, so engaging, and dark, dare I say. It's very dark, believable characters, and just gripping, and the TV series is also very, very well done. It captures the book perfectly, and Florence Pugh, she's fantastic in the lead role. So, yeah, after that I watched, what's the other one? Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. I spent a Sunday binge watching that series with Alec Guinness, and then I watched the movie version with Gary Oldman, which I've seen twice before and knew that I loved. So, yeah, I really would like to get into some more John le Carré for sure. That's something that's going to be happening. So that's the 3 books I've finished of late, other than The Master and Margarita, which I did as a read-along. Most of you will know. I did a read-along on my channel over January and February and had an amazing time with that. That's one of my all-time favourite novels, and just to be producing essays and videos about it as I go was just so rewarding and so enriching. So I feel that I know that novel so well now, and I thank everybody that came along and joined in with me. It was, as I say, very, very rewarding. So what have I got going now? Well, this book here was brought to my attention on Henry Elliott's Substack as a new release. This is about the journalist Anna Politkovskaya, who was another political assassination victim in, was it 2004, I think she was killed. And she was a journalist for, is it Niezawisima Gazeta? I can't remember what her publication was. But this is released as, it's to mark the 25th anniversary of her death? 2006 she was gunned down. So what does that make it? 20 years since she was killed. So that's why this book has come out now, and it's a series of her journalistic pieces that she published. Does it say what the newspaper was here? No. But she was famous for going into Chechnya and speaking out against what was happening there. Both times. First time being, 94 to 96, which was the failed incursion by Russia, and then following up with the 1999 one that went through 2001, which was Putin's war. Putin became Prime Minister of Russia in 1999, and he launched this war, which kind of increased his popularity. So some argue that this was a ploy by him, especially when we discussed the apartment bombings that happened in Russia. I think there were 2 in Moscow, 1 in another city, and people were killed. And then apparently another building had a bomb planted in it and it was foiled, and then discovered, or the KGB or the FSB claimed that it was a training mission and that it wasn't bombs at all, it was fertilizer. It's like, yeah. So I don't really have a view on that. I've read a few different opinions about it, whether it was a setup by the Russian state to improve Putin's popularity or whether it was not. I tend to think not, so I just said I didn't have a view, but it turns out I actually do. But what do I know? You know what I mean? It's one of them. We'll never know. Maybe in 50 years' time when the documents are unsealed. I don't know. So I'm looking forward to reading about this. I know it's going to be difficult material to read, but important. So thanks to Henry for bringing that one to my attention. Next up is Inside Russian Politics by Edwin Bacon. This is a very short read, and I'm almost finished it. I think I've got 2 chapters to go. Edwin Bacon's a professor at Birkbeck, University of London, reader in comparative politics. And this was recommended on a podcast that I've been enjoying called Russia Unfiltered. It's a podcast by 3 British expats that live in Russia and know the country well. They publish their own academic papers. They're involved. One of them is an anthropologist, one's a historian, the other's a journalist, I think. And this was recommended by the Great Britain Russia Society in an email. So as I've been listening to their back catalogue, they do discuss certain books and papers and authors. This was one, and I'm having a fantastic time with it. It's going into, well, as it says in the title, Russian politics. But it's not giving you an anti-Putin view or a pro-Putin view. It's giving you a realistic view of Russian politics as if coming from in the country rather than from an external commentator. So in that regard, I'm learning a lot from it. It's very easy to read. It's not super dense. And it covers a lot of ground. It's a short book, but I think it's all the more useful for that because, you know, some of the books, like Catherine Belton's book, Putin's People, which is also fantastic, but it does tend to get bogged down a bit in names of politicians and businessmen and all of that. So this one doesn't do that. I mean, it does mention the big names, but it doesn't go into the depth that a book the size of Catherine Belton's does. So yeah, I'm really enjoying this one. It was published in 2017, so I'm guessing written through 2016. So in that regard, it's already old. You know, it talks about Alexei Navalny as a potential candidate for the opposition. Of course, as we know now, Navalny was killed in prison, so that's not going to happen. I might do a longer written essay on this one because I think that would help me to consolidate what I'm reading. I am taking notes as I go, and those notes will be fed into a new app that I've started using called Sublime, and that allows you to bring together the notes that are imported from Readwise into Sublime, and then you can build up what are they called? Those charts that people use to create things. I can't remember what they're called. Mind maps. You can build mind maps with the cards that you've created. And so, yeah, I do plan to do a longer kind of written piece on this just because I'm thoroughly enjoying it. Definitely recommend it, and I'm looking forward to writing more about that. I've already showed you the Red Notice, so the Bill Browder book, which I've got planned for very soon. Is that everything? Can it possibly be? Another book I've got here is called I Love Russia by Yelena Kostyuchenko. This is a book about Russia in the present day, or is it? When was it written? First published in 2023, so it's pretty up to date. And Kostyuchenko was a journalist of the same paper that Politkovskaya wrote for, and I've just found it here. It wasn't Nezavisimaya Gazeta, it was Novaya Gazeta, which is the new paper. So yeah, this is an interesting book that was it mentioned? Yeah, it was. It was mentioned on that podcast, the Russia Unfiltered, in passing. So it's just the kind of book I enjoy. I've read the first few pages and we're getting into some youths running about the HZB, which is an old derelict hospital. That's where the young people go to build dens and get up to no good, carryouts and drugs and fights and that kind of thing. So yeah, I suppose it's anthropological or ethnographical, and I'm looking forward to that. From what I read about Kostyuchenko, she was a mentee of Politkovskaya. She read Politkovskaya's articles and was inspired herself to become a journalist. So yeah, that's going to be good. In fact, I'm going to go and read some of that as soon as I've stopped making this video. Well, War and Peace. I've got War and Peace on the go again, which I'm reading with Simon Hazel, chapter a week, and this is my third time reading this book, and it's a favourite. So this time I'm listening and reading to the Russian after I've read it in translation, as a means of getting my Russian back to a reasonable level again. So I'm being kind to myself and not beating myself up for low comprehension and just allowing it to wash over me. And it's starting to work, 3 months in, and I can feel it working. So the next thing to announce is the Dr. Zhivago read-along, which I'm doing on my channel starting in April and reading through to the end of July. This is my first time reading this novel, so I'm going through it this month. I'm at page 190, chapter 7, so that I will have read it before I start the longer read-along in April. And the plan is to produce essays every week, read a chapter a week with the group, and then produce similar kind of stuff that I've been doing for Master and Margarita, now that I've got my workflow down for that. And I've got some supplementary reading to do around the book as well. So I'm looking forward to that. I am at the moment reading this one, which is the Harari and Hayward translation. I've also got the Pevere and Volokhonsky translation, which I'll possibly read that next, starting in April, just so that I'll have read the two different translations and go through them and compare where I can. So that's the state of the union for my channel. It's been a good month. I'm really having a good time with the books, thoroughly enjoying the process, sitting down with a book and then taking notes and talking with you all. It's a good time. So before I go, I'd just like to let you know that I'm about 10 subscribers away from 4,000, which is just mind-blowing. 2 years it's taken me to get 4,000 subscribers. It's just, what a thrill. And I thank you all very much for your support. So I'm planning to do an Ask Me Anything once I've hit that milestone. So if you want to ask me a question, fire away, and I will do my best to answer it in a special video to mark my 4,000 subscribers. So fire away, just put one down in the comments, or there's also a community post where you can go in and put your questions in there, or on Instagram. You get me over there at Camuel, Camuel, or on my Substack, of course, where I should probably put out a short post just to elicit some questions from my readers. So there we go. Thank you all for watching and for all your support over the past 2 years. You've been amazing. See you in the next one. Bye for now.